All right, Genesis 43, let's call this one 5 times. Why? Because 5 times literally comes out of the text toward the end of the chapter, but healing is actually what it seems that this chapter opens the door to, as we see Joseph testing his brothers, possibly testing his brothers in another interesting way, trying to find out whether these boys are trustworthy. When they finally bring Benjamin back in this chapter, he's going to prepare a feast for them. They're still nervous. And so the weird thing about a guilty conscience is that I know when my conscience is unsettled, I can even interpret positives as negatives. And so when he sends them back with their money to their father, most people, if your conscience is clear, that's just a blessing. But if your conscience ain't working right, oh, good night. You can spin that in 30 different directions because you feel like you're living under the weight of condemnation. And so even good things that come your way don't sit well if your conscience ain't sitting right. And so in chapter 43, we're going to see much the same things, because when they're invited into his home, they're literally being invited into the home of the man who's second in command of Egypt. And they interpret that as, oh, wait, he's trying to make us slaves. Why? Because that's exactly what they did to their brother. And so the fact that they sold him into slavery, I don't think it's a coincidence that that's what's weighing on their conscience, as we see in around, let's say, verse 18. We'll pick up in chapter 43. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, it is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may assault us and fall upon us and make us servants and seize our donkeys. It is weighing on their minds. And so even the multiple kindnesses that he is showing them still is not sitting well once again, because their consciences aren't sitting right. But ultimately, as he continues to test him, that is where we'll see toward the end of the chapter. Verse 34 will say, as he's prepared a feast and he has actually fed them from his table. So this is the third kindness he's showing them. This is what he does. Verse 34, portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as theirs. Notice their reaction this time. And they drank and were merry with him. What was it like back when Joseph was getting the favorable treatment in the household? That sent them into a murderous spin. And so these boys have grown. And as Jacob is testing them, he's not only finding that as he can overhear them in their native tongue, back in chapter 42, he can hear them confessing to one another the fact that they were guilty of the things that they did to Joseph, something that they couldn't bring themselves to admit back when he was there. Now they've come full circle in terms of candor, and now it seems that they're coming full circle in terms of understanding that even though Benjamin is getting more favorable treatment, they are now emotionally mature enough to be able to handle it. And of course, the lesson for us is this. It is so easy for me to care about justice when I am the one who is on the receiving end of what I perceive as an injustice. But am I mature enough as an individual to realize that unfortunately injustices are sometimes a part of life, and how I respond to them has everything to do with what God is prepared to do with and for me? Does that mean I become delusional and all of a sudden begin to pretend that right is wrong and wrong is right? No, that's delusion. But at the same time, I can begin to understand, much like God instructed Cain, if you do well, will you not be honored? And as these boys would probably have done well to realize, one of the reasons why, as we talked about today in the message, that Joseph was probably honored more highly is because he displayed throughout this story a consistently higher level of character. And so it's quite natural for a father who can rely more on a child to have a heart for that child. And so likewise with Cain, if you do well, will you not be honored the same? Too often we live in a society where people complain about performance certificates being handed out to others, but they expect the same thing. They don't necessarily want to put in the work, the hours, and the grind, but they want the same recognition as those who do. And so what we seem to be seeing now is a group of brothers who no longer need a performance certificate, able to celebrate with Benjamin while he's getting a greater honor, understanding he was never involved in selling his brother into slavery. And now, having seen that, Joseph seems willing to extend healing to the entire family.